My 7-year-old daughter Emma created an imaginary friend named Mr. Patches, who she drew as a dark figure with multiple arms and eyes. When she tried to put eye drops in her baby brother's bottle and said, "Mr. Patches says Jake will see him soon," we found notebooks full of detailed plans to hurt him. She taught herself lockpicking from YouTube to break into his room, then scratched herself until she bled to frame us for abuse when we tried to get her help. For as long as I could remember, my daughter Emma never opened her mouth for me, or anyone else for that matter, because she was extremely shy and hated talking. I'll never forget the day I watched her through the school fence, setting up a tea party with empty chairs, pretending someone was laughing at her jokes. It was around this time that Emma started hanging out with a grown man named Mr. Patches. Mr. Patches was her imaginary friend, and at first, he seemed like a gift from the heavens. He gave her the type of confidence that kids can only get from friends, not family. I still remember how I felt when Emma came home with her first birthday party invitation. Sarah broke down crying in the kitchen. Our baby was finally being included. But within a couple months, Emma's life started revolving around Mr. Patches. She began having these long conversations in her room where we could hear both sides of the dialogue. She'd change her voice slightly for Mr. Patches. Her new friends from school refused to play at our house because Mr. Patches made them uncomfortable. Emma would tell them things like, "Mr. Patches doesn't like how loud you breathe." I brought it up to my wife one night and she said, "F them. If they can't handle Emma's quirks, they don't deserve to be her friend anyway." I agreed, because this was our precious Emma we were talking about. It wasn't until Sarah found Emma's drawings that she finally decided there was a problem, because right there on the sheets of paper was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Emma had drawn a wholesome family portrait of us. I would have smiled like I always did whenever she drew us, but this time there was someone else with us. Behind us was this tall, dark figure with multiple arms and legs and eyes that ran down its limbs. Our baby son Jake also had X marks over his eyes. Emma had written, "Mr. Patches says Jake will see him soon," at the bottom. We tried to stay calm and asked Emma about the drawings. She instantly piped up and gave us the biggest smile we'd ever seen. "Yes, Daddy, isn't it great? Mr. Patches lives inside all of us now." My wife and I couldn't have left the room faster. Sarah actually hyperventilated and dropped to her knees sobbing, asking me what was wrong with our child. I didn't even know how to answer that question. Sarah and I felt helpless, and in the time we decided what to do with our baby, things took a turn I never expected. It began when our motion sensors started going off at 3 a.m. every morning. When I checked the security footage, I saw Emma walking through the house, opening windows and unlocking doors. She'd stand there and smile creepily while gesturing for something or someone to come in. She waited a couple seconds and then closed the door and hugged thin air. I was so scared of who she was becoming, I didn't even know how to talk to her about it, so I just didn't. Until later that day, when Emma tried to unalive our newborn baby. It was feeding time, and Sarah looked away for 1 second. That was all it took for Emma to sneak in some eye drops into his sippy cup. She hid the drops behind her back and smiled innocently as she said it was just water. Sarah got scared and threw the cup into the sink. She opened her mouth to scold Emma, but she hit her to it. "You're ruining everything, I fucking hate you," she screamed so loudly I thought the windows were going to shatter. Sarah instantly trembled. I'd never seen her look at Emma with fear before. It was then that I realized we had let things go too far. I told Emma she needed to apologize to her mom and that she couldn't continue being like this. What she was doing was causing us harm. I braced myself for her to burst into tears, or even just to go nonverbal, but no. Instead, she lunged at Sarah and scratched her face until red was showing. "You're just jealous because he loves me more than you." As soon as I got her off, she ran to her room and barricaded the door with her dresser. From the outside, I could hear her repeating, "I'm sorry, I love you. I'm sorry, I love you," over and over. At that point, Emma was the least of my worries. I took Sarah to urgent care and got her patched up. She kept asking me to help our daughter, that she wasn't being herself. I told her we would handle it as soon as we made sure she was okay. I wish I had known that it was the last time I'd ever see my daughter again. The girl I saw the next day wasn't Emma, or not really anyway. I was fast asleep at 2 a.m. when I heard static on the baby monitor. My heart was pounding as I ran to Jake's room at full speed, wondering what Emma had done to him now. From the hallway, I could spot a large shadow emerging by his crib. What I saw next made my insides twist. Emma was standing over his crib with scissors in her hands. Her eyes were completely unfocused, like she was sleepwalking. "Mr. Patches says if we fix his eyes, he can always see him," she said. I tried to grab the scissors, but she fought harder than I'd ever seen her fight. She kept crying, "Mr. Patches says this is the only way he'll forgive me. He says Jake needs to see him." I could hear the sirens outside. Emma kept cackling and repeating, "He's touching your shoulder right now, Daddy. Can't you feel his fingers?" The scissors clattered to the floor as I finally wrenched them from Emma's grip. She thrashed against me, her small body surprisingly strong, fingernails clawing at my arms. Sarah burst through the doorway, her face still bandaged from earlier, and Emma's demeanor shifted instantly. Her wild eyes softened, tears streaming down her cheeks as she collapsed against me, sobbing, "Daddy's hurting me. He's hurting me," Emma wailed, her voice carrying through the open windows she'd unlocked earlier. The sirens grew louder, and I realized with growing dread what this looked like. My daughter, screaming accusations while I held her arms pinned. The police officers entered Jake's nursery with hands on their holsters, taking in the scene, the scissors on the floor, Emma's tears, my defensive posture. One officer gently separated us, while his partner checked on Jake, who was miraculously still sleeping in his crib. "She had scissors," I started to explain, but Emma interrupted with another sob. "He grabbed me so hard," she whimpered to the female officer, who knelt beside her. "I was just checking on my baby brother." The EMTs arrived moments later, examining Emma's arms where faint red marks had appeared from my grip. They checked her vitals while she performed perfectly, a scared little girl who'd been manhandled by her father. Sarah tried to interject, to explain about Mr. Patches and the drawings, but the officers were focused on Emma's immediate distress. At the hospital, they separated us. A social worker with kind eyes and a clipboard asked me questions in a small consultation room, while Sarah waited with Jake in another area. Through the window, I watched Emma charm the nursing staff. Her earlier hysteria completely vanished. She drew pictures for them, shared stories about school, acted like any normal 7-year-old. "Your daughter says you've been hurting her," the social worker said carefully. "She's been very consistent in her statements to multiple staff members." My stomach dropped. Emma had prepared for this. Every detail she'd shared was calculated, believable. She told them I got angry when she talked to Mr. Patches, that I grabbed her when she tried to play with Jake, that Mommy was too scared to stop me. The psychiatric evaluation team observed Emma for hours. She never mentioned Mr. Patches once during their assessment. When they finally allowed Sarah and me to see her, she ran to us with open arms, the perfect daughter reunion. But when the staff turned away, she whispered something that chilled me. "Mr. Patches says you're learning." They placed her on a 72-hour psychiatric hold after I insisted on Jake's safety, showing them photos of the drawings on my phone. The psychiatrist seemed more concerned about my fixation on the imaginary friend than Emma's behavior, but protocol demanded they err on the side of caution when a sibling's safety was in question. We returned home at 4 a.m., exhausted and shaken. Sarah went to check on Jake while I collapsed on the couch, trying to process what had happened. That's when I noticed Emma's bedroom door was ajar. We'd closed it before leaving. Inside, tucked behind her bookshelf, I found a notebook we'd never seen before. My hands shook as I flipped through pages and pages of drawings, all dated meticulously in Emma's careful handwriting. The earliest ones went back 6 months, long before she'd first mentioned Mr. Patches to us. The progression was horrifying. Simple stick figures at first, then increasingly detailed depictions of violence toward Jake. Not random, childish scribbles, but methodical planning. Drawings of his crib from different angles, of his daily routine, of ways to reach him when we weren't looking. Sarah found me there, surrounded by evidence of our daughter's long deception. She broke down completely when she saw a drawing dated 3 weeks ago. Jake's crib marked with X's over where his eyes would be, just like the drawing that had finally prompted us to act. "She's been planning this," Sarah whispered. "All this time, she's been planning." The doorbell rang at 8 a.m. A CPS worker stood on our porch with a badge and a mandate to perform a routine follow-up from the hospital report. We scrambled to hide the notebook, shoving it into our bedroom closet while the worker examined our home. She noted Sarah's scratched face with careful neutrality, took photos of Emma's room, checked our food supplies and safety measures. We smiled and nodded, playing the role of concerned but stable parents while our minds raced. How could we explain what our 7-year-old was capable of? Who would believe that a child could orchestrate such calculated manipulation? The psychiatric facility called just as the CPS worker was leaving. Mr. Patches went from tea party guest to nightmare roommate faster than you can say imaginary friend intervention, though I'm pretty sure Emma's version of hide and seek involves way too much plotting and not enough seeking professional help. Emma was refusing medication, they said. She kept insisting she needed to come home to protect Jake from Mr. Patches. The irony wasn't lost on us. She was using our own fears against us, making herself seem like the protective sister. On the second day of her hold, they finally allowed us to visit. Emma seemed completely normal at first, coloring quietly in the common room. She showed us her artwork, happy families and rainbow houses. Then, as a nurse passed by, she looked up at us with those innocent eyes. "Mr. Patches is very angry with you," she said conversationally. "He says you broke the rules." That evening, Sarah discovered her anxiety medication was missing. We tore apart the medicine cabinet, checked every drawer, before Sarah thought to look in Emma's room. There, tucked inside a stuffed animal, was the bottle, half empty. Emma had been taking Sarah's medication. We couldn't fathom why until the horrible possibility struck us. She'd been experimenting, learning what the pills did, maybe even using them on herself to appear more docile during evaluations. The hospital psychiatrist dismissed our concerns with professional detachment. "Imaginary friends are completely normal for children her age," he assured us. "What Emma needs is stability and family therapy. This hospitalization is likely more traumatic than beneficial." I broke down at work the next day. My boss found me in the break room, head in my hands, unable to explain why I couldn't focus on spreadsheets when my daughter was planning to hurt my son. He granted me emergency leave without questions, though I could see the concern in his eyes. Then the daycare called. Emma's former friend, a little girl named Lily, had been having nightmares and crying fits. During a breakdown, she'd told her teacher about the things Emma whispered during playtime. The daycare couldn't provide details, but suggested we might want to speak with Lily's mother. We found her in the parking lot after pickup, looking as exhausted as we felt. When we explained our situation, her face went pale. "Lily won't sleep alone anymore," she admitted. "She says Emma told her things, detailed things, about how to hurt babies, about how to make it look like an accident." The revelation opened a floodgate. 3 other families quietly admitted their children had stopped coming over after Emma's games became disturbing. They'd been too embarrassed to say anything, assuming it was just a phase. One mother broke down crying, describing how Emma had explained to her 4-year-old the exact pressure points that would stop a baby's breathing. Father discovered another notebook that evening, hidden in the garage. This one contained what Emma called Mr. Patches' instructions, detailed plans written in her neat handwriting, page after page of manipulation tactics, how to cry on command, what words made adults feel guilty, how to act normal when doctors were watching. Sarah's sister finally admitted something she'd been hiding. 2 months ago, she'd caught Emma trying to show her 3-year-old how to play sleeping with a pillow. She'd intervened immediately, but hadn't wanted to upset us by mentioning it. She thought Emma was just being a weird kid. We compiled everything into a binder, drawings, testimonies, evidence of Emma's calculated behavior. But as we looked at it all laid out, we realized the horrible truth. Who would believe us? What professional would look at this and see anything other than desperate parents trying to villainize their child? The 7-day hold was ending. In the discharge meeting, Emma performed flawlessly. She apologized for scaring us. She promised to be a good big sister. She even cried at the right moments, talking about how much she missed Jake. The psychiatrist recommended outpatient therapy and sent us home with pamphlets about positive parenting. The car ride home was silent until Emma spoke from the back seat, her voice bright and cheerful. "Mr. Patches missed you too," she said, smiling at us in the rearview mirror. "He says we can all be together again now." The moment we pulled into our driveway, Emma unbuckled herself and skipped toward the front door, humming a tune I didn't recognize. Sarah's hands trembled as she lifted Jake from his car seat, holding him closer than necessary. I watched Emma wait patiently by the door, her small frame silhouetted against the afternoon sun, looking every bit the innocent child the psychiatrist believed her to be. Inside, Emma made a beeline for Jake's nursery. I intercepted her in the hallway, my body blocking the doorway. She tilted her head, studying me with those calculating eyes that no longer held any trace of childhood innocence. She explained that she just wanted to apologize to her baby brother, to show him she was better now. Her performance was flawless, the slight quiver in her voice, the way her fingers twisted together nervously. If I hadn't seen the notebooks, hadn't heard the testimonies from other parents, I might have believed her. Sarah took Jake to our bedroom while I supervised Emma's return to her room. She moved through the house like she was mapping it, her eyes lingering on windows, doorknobs, the baby monitor on the counter. When she finally entered her room, she sat on her bed and began arranging her stuffed animals in a semicircle, whispering to each one in turn. That first night home, Sarah and I barely slept. We'd moved Jake's crib into our room, but every creak of the house, every whisper of wind against the windows, made us bolt upright. At 3 a.m., we heard Emma's door open. I found her standing in the hallway, staring at our bedroom door. When I asked what she needed, she simply turned and walked back to her room without a word. The next morning, I installed interior locks on Jake's nursery door, the kind that locked from the outside. Emma watched from her doorway as I worked, her expression unreadable. Sarah kept Jake in the baby carrier strapped to her chest, refusing to set him down even to make breakfast. We established new routines. One of us was always awake, always watching. We baby-proofed beyond reason, locks on every cabinet, every drawer, even the toilet lids. Emma observed our preparations with the patience of a chess player studying the board. 3 nights later, I woke to a scraping sound. Emma was kneeling outside Jake's locked nursery, working a bobby pin into the lock mechanism. The moonlight caught her face in profile, focused, determined, completely absorbed in her task. When I cleared my throat, she didn't startle. She simply stood, dropped the bobby pin, and walked back to her room. I found the YouTube videos on our tablet the next morning, lockpicking tutorials she'd watched while we thought she was doing educational games. Her search history revealed hours of research into home security systems, child safety locks, even infant sleep patterns. 7 years old, and she was studying us like we were specimens in a lab. Sarah suggested we sleep in shifts. I took the night watch while she handled days. We moved through our home like guards in a prison, except we weren't keeping someone in. We were keeping our daughter away from our son. The house felt smaller each day, the walls pressing in as we navigated the careful dance of keeping Jake safe without triggering another incident that might bring CPS back. Emma adapted to every security measure with disturbing efficiency. When we locked the kitchen knives in a drawer, she fashioned sharp implements from broken toys. When we removed anything potentially dangerous from her room, she began collecting items during her supervised time in common areas. Paper clips bent into hooks, rubber bands twisted into restraints, pencils sharpened to points. The drawings continued, but now she left them where we'd find them. In Jake's crib, during the 30 seconds Sarah took to use the bathroom, tucked into my work bag, slipped under our bedroom door while we slept. Each one more detailed than the last, showing Jake in increasingly disturbing scenarios, always with Mr. Patches looming nearby. We called the outpatient psychiatrist our insurance had approved. Dr. Martinez listened to our concerns with professional patience, then suggested we redirect Emma's creativity toward positive outlets, art therapy, music, dance. When we tried to explain the calculating nature of her behavior, he gently reminded us that children often act out when they feel replaced by a new sibling. Sarah quit her job after the second week. We couldn't afford daycare for Jake anyway, not with the psychiatric bills piling up. She spent her days following Emma from room to room while I worked, trying to maintain normalcy while preventing catastrophe. The exhaustion showed in the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook when she thought I wasn't looking. Emma's campaign of psychological warfare escalated subtly. She would stand outside our bedroom door at night, whispering conversations with Mr. Patches just loud enough for us to hear. She began telling elaborate stories to anyone who would listen. The mailman, the grocery clerk, the neighbor walking his dog, stories about how hungry she was because mommy forgot to feed her, how daddy locked her in her room, how her parents loved Jake more. The neighbors started avoiding us. I caught concerned glances when I retrieved the mail, heard conversations stop when I walked past. Emma had successfully begun isolating us from potential support systems, and she knew it. The smile she gave me when Mrs. Henderson hurried inside rather than wave hello was chilling in its satisfaction. Sarah's mother visited on a Saturday afternoon, ostensibly to help with the children. Within an hour, Emma had climbed onto her grandmother's lap and asked, with perfect innocent curiosity, how long babies could hold their breath underwater. She wanted to teach Jake to swim, she explained. The look of horror on Sarah's mother's face when she relayed this conversation was matched only by Emma's serene smile as she colored in her book nearby. Emma's doing lockpicking tutorials on YouTube while other kids watch cartoons. That's definitely not going in the baby book. The dedication to breaking into Jake's room would be impressive if it wasn't completely terrifying. We attempted a family meeting, sitting Emma down for what we hoped would be a breakthrough conversation. We spoke calmly about feelings, about adjusting to being a big sister, about appropriate ways to express frustration. Emma listened with rapt attention, nodding at all the right moments, even shedding a few tears when we talked about how much we loved her. For a brief moment, I felt hope. That hope shattered when I found her that night, standing over Jake's crib with a pillow in her hands. We'd forgotten to lock the door during the emotional family meeting. She dropped the pillow when she saw me, claiming she was just bringing Jake his special pillow because she thought he looked uncomfortable. The lie was delivered with such conviction that for a second, I almost believed her. The extended family baptism scheduled for the following week became a source of intense anxiety. Sarah's Sarah's entire family would be there, cousins with babies, elderly relatives who wouldn't understand why we couldn't let Emma hold her brother. We discussed canceling, but that would raise questions we weren't prepared to answer. Emma overheard us planning to leave her with a babysitter during the baptism. The silent treatment that followed lasted 12 hours. She moved through the house like a ghost, present but unreachable, her silence more unnerving than any tantrum could have been. When she finally spoke again, it was to inform us that Mr. Patches was very disappointed in our decision. The babysitter canceled the morning of the baptism. When we called to confirm, she apologized profusely, explaining that Sarah had called earlier to cancel, saying the event had been postponed. But Sarah hadn't made that call. Emma's ability to mimic her mother's voice had reached a new level of sophistication. With no other option, we decided Sarah would stay home with Emma while I took Jake to his pediatrician appointment that couldn't be rescheduled. It was supposed to be routine, just vaccines and a weight check. As I buckled Jake into his car seat, Emma watched from the window, her palm pressed against the glass in what might have been a wave goodbye or a promise. The pediatrician's office was a 20-minute drive. 15 minutes in, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Can't find her anywhere. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I made a U-turn, tires squealing. Jake began crying in the back seat, sensing my panic. I found Sarah in the backyard, calling Emma's name with increasing desperation. We searched every room, every closet, every possible hiding spot. It wasn't until I heard a muffled giggle from beneath the house that I realized she'd found the crawl space access we'd forgotten existed. Emma emerged, covered in dirt and cobwebs, clutching something in her small fist. When she opened her hand, Jake's hospital bracelet from birth fell onto the grass. She'd been collecting trophies, she explained matter-of-factly. Mr. Patches liked to keep special things from special people. The search that followed revealed caches throughout the house. Behind loose baseboards, inside air vents, tucked into the insulation in the attic. Photos of Jake, locks of his hair, his first pacifier. Even the positive pregnancy test Sarah had saved in her memory box. Emma had been building a shrine to her brother, or perhaps to what she planned to do to him. The confrontation that followed was unlike anything we'd experienced. Emma didn't cry or rage. She laughed, a sound too knowing for a 7-year-old. She informed us with calm certainty that we couldn't watch both of them forever, that parents had to sleep, that locks could be picked and windows could be opened, and babies were so very fragile. I found her second notebook that evening, hidden inside a hollowed-out book in her bookshelf. This one contained detailed floor plans of our house, complete with measurements. Our daily schedules were mapped out in precise detail. When Sarah showered, when I took work calls, when Jake napped, she'd identified every moment of vulnerability in our routine. Sarah's co-worker called the next day, concerned about Sarah's extended absence. As a mandated reporter, she asked careful questions about our family situation. Sarah managed to deflect, claiming she was taking time to bond with the baby, but I could see the suspicion in her colleague's eyes when she stopped by to drop off paperwork. At school pickup, Emma transformed into the perfect daughter. She chatted with teachers, showed off her artwork, hugged classmates goodbye. The contrast between her public persona and private behavior was so stark that I began to question my own sanity. Was I imagining the threat? Was I the one destroying our family with paranoia? That doubt evaporated when Sarah's parents offered to take Emma for a weekend getaway. During the planning call, Emma climbed onto her grandmother's lap and mentioned, almost offhandedly, that Mommy had been hitting her when Daddy wasn't home. The accusation was delivered with such sweet innocence that her grandmother immediately confronted Sarah. The family divided quickly. Those who'd witnessed Emma's concerning behavior sided with us. Those who only saw the charming public facade believed we were the problem. Sarah's sister reminded everyone about the pillow incident with her toddler, but Emma's supporters dismissed it as a misunderstanding. Our support system crumbled as Emma successfully orchestrated the isolation she needed. I realized the true extent of her manipulation when I discovered she'd been eavesdropping on our late-night discussions. She'd moved her bed against the shared wall, pressed a glass to it to amplify sound. Every strategy we discussed, every fear we voiced, she absorbed and adapted to. We were inadvertently teaching her how to be a more effective predator. The search for a new psychiatrist led to another devastating blow. Emma told the intake coordinator that her previous doctor had touched her inappropriately. The accusation triggered a mandatory investigation, even though we knew it was false. Emma smiled serenely as investigators questioned her, spinning a tale so detailed and consistent that even I found myself wondering if we'd missed something. The investigation cleared the original psychiatrist, but left us blacklisted in the psychiatric community. Word spread quickly. We were the parents who'd allegedly allowed abuse, then tried to institutionalize our daughter when she spoke up. Emma had effectively cut off our access to professional help with a single strategic lie. Our friends began distancing themselves as rumors spread through the school community. Birthday party invitations stopped coming. Playdates were politely declined. Emma's narrative of abuse and neglect, spread through careful whispers to classmates who told their parents, had made us pariahs. Jake began missing developmental milestones. The constant disruption, the tension in the house, the fact that he was rarely put down, it all took its toll. He stopped babbling, stopped reaching for toys, stopped smiling. Our pediatrician expressed concern, but how could we explain that his sister was the cause without sounding insane? Sarah made the decision to quit her job entirely. The financial strain was immediate and severe, but we couldn't risk leaving Jake in daycare where Emma might find a way to reach him. We sold Sarah's car, canceled subscriptions, ate rice and beans for dinner. Every dollar saved went toward keeping our children separated. I discovered Emma's third notebook hidden in the garage rafters. This one made my blood run cold. She'd drawn tombstones with dates. Jake's showed tomorrow's date. Mine showed next week. Sarah's was marked for next month. At the bottom, in her neat handwriting, Mr. Patches says this is the order. The emergency family meeting we called that night was a disaster. We proposed sending Emma to wilderness therapy, a last resort program for troubled children. Emma must have heard us making the calls because she arrived at the meeting as the perfect daughter. She helped set the table, offered to get drinks for everyone, played quietly with her cousins. When we brought up our our concerns, Emma's performance reached new heights. She cried delicately, admitting she'd been jealous of Jake, but promising she was working on it in therapy. She hugged her grandparents, told them how scared she was that mommy and daddy didn't love her anymore. By the end of the evening, we were the villains, the parents who couldn't bond with their sensitive daughter. The sleep deprivation campaign began that night. Subtle noises every hour, a tap on the wall, a creak of floorboards, a whispered giggle, never enough to fully wake us, but sufficient to prevent deep sleep. Within a week, Sarah was hallucinating from exhaustion. I fell asleep at a red light and woke to honking horns. I caught Emma in the garage, fashioning tools from wire coat hangers and dismantled toys. She'd been watching YouTube videos on our neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi, learning to create implements that could fit through the gaps under doors. Her focus was absolute, her small fingers working with surgical precision. We contacted a residential treatment facility, desperate for help. The intake coordinator listened sympathetically until she mentioned the price, $30,000 per month, not covered by insurance without a documented incident requiring intervention. Emma overheard the call from her hiding spot in the air vent. That night, she whispered through the walls that she just needed to be more careful. The pediatric nurse from Jake's doctor's office called unexpectedly. She'd noticed our distress during appointments, she said carefully. Off the record, she'd seen similar situations. She provided a name, Dr. Chen, a behavioral specialist who understood children like Emma. It was the first hope we'd felt in months. Dr. Chen observed Emma during 3 separate sessions, using techniques that bypassed her usual manipulations. Dr. Chen showing up like the final boss in a video game where Emma's been speedrunning the villain tutorial. Finally, someone who might actually see through her Oscar-worthy performances and creepy Mr. Patch's puppet show routine. She documented the micro-expressions Emma couldn't quite control, the calculated nature of her responses, the way she studied the office for weapons even while playing with blocks. Her report was the first professional validation of what we'd been experiencing. The recommendation was immediate residential treatment at a specialized facility 2 states away. The cost would bankrupt us, but Dr. Chen's documentation might convince insurance to cover part of it. We began the paperwork, refinancing our house to cover the initial deposit. Emma seemed to sense the walls closing in. She became eerily cooperative, helping with chores, playing quietly, even offering to read stories to Jake through the locked door. Her acceptance of the situation should have been a relief. Instead, it filled me with dread. The final week before her scheduled departure revealed the depth of her planning. I found her 4th notebook, filled with observations about our behavior over the past months. She documented our every reaction, every strategy, every moment of weakness. The final entry, dated that morning, simply read, "Mr. Patches says there's still time to fix everything." That night, Emma appeared genuinely remorseful for the first time. She helped Sarah prepare dinner without being asked, carefully setting the table with the plastic utensils we'd switched 2 weeks ago. Her movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if she was memorizing every detail of our family routine. The following evening, Emma approached us with tears in her eyes, asking if she could help pack for her trip to the facility. Sarah and I exchanged wary glances, but allowed her to fold her clothes into the suitcase we'd bought. She handled each item with care, placing her favorite stuffed bear on top before zipping it closed. Emma even asked to say goodnight to Jake through his locked door. She pressed her small hand against the wood and whispered something we couldn't quite hear. When she turned back to us, her expression was unreadable, but she went to bed without protest. I found Emma's 4th notebook while doing a final sweep of her room. The pages contained meticulous documentation of our routines, our reactions to her behavior, every security measure we'd implemented. But it was the final entry that made my blood run cold. "Mr. Patches says there's still time to fix everything." At 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of scratching, not the usual subtle noises Emma used for sleep deprivation, but desperate, frantic scratching. I rushed to the hallway to find Emma clawing at her own arms, drawing blood with her fingernails. When she saw me, she began screaming that we'd locked her in her room and hurt her. Sarah called 911 while I tried to stop Emma from injuring herself further. She fought with shocking strength, all while maintaining her story that we'd done this to her. By the time the paramedics arrived, she'd managed to create an impressive array of scratches and bruises, each one carefully placed for maximum visual impact. The police officers who responded treated the scene as a potential child abuse case. Emma performed flawlessly, trembling and crying as she showed them her self-inflicted wounds. She explained how we'd been hurting her ever since Jake was born, how they locked her in her room at night, how she was so hungry because we forgot to feed her. At the hospital, the staff documented every mark on Emma's body while she spun an elaborate tale of abuse. She knew exactly which details would trigger mandatory reporting, which phrases would make the staff question our fitness as parents. Sarah and I could only watch as our daughter orchestrated her most sophisticated manipulation yet. CPS placed a 24-hour safety monitor in our home the next day. A rotating team of observers would watch our family interactions, document our parenting, and ensure both children's safety. Emma had effectively turned our home into a supervised facility, with strangers monitoring our every move. The safety monitor, a woman named Ms. Rodriguez, settled into our living room with her notebook and keen eyes. Emma immediately began her campaign to win her over, offering to show her drawings, asking about her own children, displaying perfect manners that we hadn't seen in months. Within hours, Emma had begun her manipulation of Ms. Rodriguez. She would flinch slightly when I entered a room, move protectively closer to the monitor when Sarah approached. Every interaction was calculated to reinforce her narrative of being an abused child in need of protection. But Emma had underestimated Ms. Rodriguez's experience. The monitor had seen truly abused children, knew the difference between genuine fear and performance. She documented Emma's attempts to manipulate her, noting the calculated nature of each flinch, each tearful glance, each perfectly timed tremor. On the second day, Ms. Rodriguez caught Emma in Jake's room during a shift change. The door we'd religiously kept locked was somehow open, and Emma stood over his crib with a throw pillow in her hands. When confronted, Emma immediately began crying about about just wanting to make her brother comfortable. Ms. Rodriguez's report to her supervisor triggered an emergency hearing. The judge would review all evidence and determine whether the children should remain in our home. We had 48 hours to prepare our case while living under constant observation. Emma's behavior escalated as the hearing approached. She began whispering to Ms. Rodriguez about Mr. Patches, how he lived in the walls, how he told her things about hurting babies. The monitor documented every word, recognizing the calculated nature of Emma's revelations, the way she watched for reactions while maintaining her innocent facade. The morning of the hearing, Emma refused to eat breakfast, claiming we'd poisoned her food. When Ms. Rodriguez offered to make her something, Emma ate readily, shooting triumphant glances at us. Every action was designed to reinforce her narrative for the court. At the courthouse, Emma was interviewed via video link from a child-friendly room. Her testimony was chilling in its sophistication. She described abuse that never happened with perfect consistency, adding just enough hesitation to seem genuine. She cried at precisely the right moments, her voice breaking as she described her fear of returning home. The state's attorney presented Emma's testimony as evidence of severe abuse. Our lawyer, a public defender overwhelmed with cases, seemed ready to encourage a plea deal. The safety monitor's reports were dismissed as potentially biased since we'd had days to influence her. Then, Dr. Chen arrived as our witness. She'd driven through the night to be there, carrying her extensive documentation of Emma's behavior. Her testimony was clinical, precise, and devastating to the state's case. She explained Emma's manipulation patterns, her sophisticated understanding of the system, the calculated nature of her accusations. The judge ordered a recess to review Dr. Chen's reports. During the break, Emma must have sensed the tide turning. When the video link resumed, she began speaking without prompting, her voice different, older somehow. She described in detail what she would do to Jake if they sent her home, how Mr. Patches had taught her patience, how she'd waited this long and could wait longer. The courtroom fell silent as Emma continued her monologue. She threatened Dr. Chen's grandchildren, whose names she'd somehow learned. She explained how she'd researched each court official, knew where they lived, where their children went to school. The mask had finally, completely dropped. The judge ordered immediate psychiatric evaluation by a court-appointed specialist. Within hours, the evaluation confirmed what Dr. Chen had documented. Emma showed signs of severe disturbance requiring intensive treatment. The state's attorney withdrew their abuse allegations, faced with overwhelming evidence of Emma's manipulation. The placement order came through that afternoon. Emma would be transferred to a specialized facility equipped to handle children with her level of disturbance. The same facility Dr. Chen had originally recommended, now covered by emergency state funding given the severity of the case. Emma's transfer happened the next morning. She walked to the transport van with eerie calm, turning back only once to look at our house. Her expression was serene, almost satisfied, as if this had been her plan all along. The last thing she said to the transport officer was clear enough for us to hear. Mr. Patches is very patient. The house felt different with Emma gone. Jake began babbling again within days, reaching for toys, smiling at us with pure infant joy. Sarah and I moved through our routine slowly at first, still checking locks, still startling at night sounds, still expecting to find Emma standing in doorways. We found a support group for parents of children with severe behavioral disorders. The first meeting was held in a church basement, just 6 other couples who understood the unique grief of loving a dangerous child. No one questioned our story or suggested we hadn't tried hard enough. Sarah returned to work part-time while I adjusted my schedule to be home with Jake. The financial strain eased slightly, though the facility bills would follow us for years. We sold the house eventually, moving to a smaller place without crawl spaces or hidden corners. The monthly supervised visits with Emma showed no improvement. She would sit across from us in the facility's visiting room, speaking calmly about Mr. Patches, about her plans, about how much she missed Jake. Talk about playing the long game. Emma turned, getting caught into her master plan, like a chess player sacrificing their queen just to checkmate 3 moves later. The staff reported she'd attempted to manipulate 3 different workers in her first month, each attempt more sophisticated than the last. Other families from the support group shared similar stories. Children who'd hidden their true nature until a sibling arrived. Kids who'd fooled dozens of professionals before finally being properly diagnosed. We learned we weren't alone, weren't failures as parents, weren't responsible for the broken wiring in our daughter's mind. Jake's second birthday came with mixed emotions. We celebrated in our new home, a small gathering of the few friends who'd stood by us. Emma sent a card from the facility, a drawing of our family with Jake's face scribbled out. We filed it with the others, documentation we hoped we'd never need again. The facility reports painted a clear picture. Emma's brilliant mind created increasingly elaborate manipulation attempts, but the trained staff recognized and redirected each one. She would likely need lifelong care, they explained. Her condition was manageable, but not curable. 2 years after that night with the scissors, we'd found our new normal. Jake thrived in preschool, hitting every milestone with enthusiasm. Sarah and I still slept in shifts sometimes, old habits dying hard. We'd learned to live with the grief of losing a child who was still alive, of loving someone we could never trust. Emma remained institutionalized, her brilliant mind creating new schemes that the facility staff had learned to anticipate. We visited monthly, maintaining the connection while protecting the son we'd nearly lost. Our love for Emma existed now through locked doors and supervised visits, expressed in the distance we maintained for everyone's safety. The other families in our support group became our extended family. We shared strategies, celebrated small victories, mourned setbacks together. When new parents joined, wild-eyed and desperate, we recognized ourselves from years before and offered the validation we desperately needed. Our story wasn't unique, we learned, just rarely spoken about. The arithmetic of choosing one child's safety over another's freedom was a calculation too many families knew. We'd chosen Jake's life over Emma's presence, a decision that would define us forever, but one we'd make again without hesitation. Damn, this shit was crazy, but I'll catch you guys in the next vid. You already know I don't sleep.